Hey folks, are you getting the most out of your post-fire reviews? Well, tonight we're going to be talking about effective questions you can ask to make your department better, and we'll review a form that the Phoenix Fire Department is using to collect data and make data-based decisions on how to change their operations for the future. All that and more on the next episode of Tailboard Talk, coming up right after this. Welcome to Tailboard Talk with
Chris Rasmussen,
Craig Nelson, and Jeff Wallin. Every month we explore different topics of interest to you, our cohorts in fire and emergency services. So whether you sit back and listen, sound off on the message board, or call in live to be part of the conversation, we welcome you to join us in our mission to improve the fire service for those we serve and those we serve beside. Now coming to you live from the Great White North, this is Tailboard Talk on Fire Engineering Talk Radio. Hey, welcome to Tailboard Talk for Friday, June 30th. I'm Jeff.
I'm Craig.
And Chris.
And as is our custom, we have to report on the weather. Thank you, guys. So it's a beautiful sunny day out here at the Tailboard Talk
just for
studios.
the older listeners.
We are in the full swing of summer. We got the air conditioning on in the background. The grass is green. We're praying for rain and all that kind of good, happy stuff. And you might have noticed that things are a little bit different on this show, too. We are testing a whole new podcasting setup, the one that we've maybe talked about an episode or two in the past that we never quite got to. So we've got some microphones in our faces. We've got headphones on our ears. We're way too bound to the table than we're used to being. And there's also an initial real down and dirty video feed that's going on live. So if you're listening to this on the Blog Talk radio site, there's also a live audio feed possible, and I'm not sure how that technology works, but we'll figure it out and we'll let you know. So you can actually see what Craig looks like, and you can see what Chris looks like, and I'm producing in the background because we only have one camera, so
We'll get some more cameras to make sure Jeff's on there. It's pretty fancy, Jeff. I like it. We were just laughing. I don't know what to do with my hands. Now I'm on video, so I'm like, do I keep moving my hands? Do I do stuff like that?
I think you need to keep your hands in motion during the whole podcast. That's really the point of all this.
The disappointing part about it is in the background, in the Craig Nelson Memorial Podcast Studio that we're broadcasting from, is the fridges, and we can't open them up now because we're on video. So
yeah,
appreciate that, Jeff. I really do.
Sure. I'm sure you're also happy that most of the space that the meat and cheese tray would have taken on the middle of the table is now taken up by podcasting equipment. So that's great. And I don't think we quite have the camera angle to be able to see the burn poster on the back fridge over there.
Yeah, we can catch it.
You can?
It's on there.
Oh, awesome.
Good.
Wow.
So
Nice.
what's new, Jeff? Besides the weather?
Yeah, besides the weather. Well, I don't know. We're getting some new staff on board in our department and training up some supervisors and starting to think about strategic planning for our agency and where we can go in the future. Those are always kind of exciting times. They're challenging times. And whenever you're challenging the status quo, there's always a little bit of push and pull between the folks who want to kind of move forward and take on new territory, new ideas, and those who kind of like things the way they are and or the way things used to be in the past. So looking forward to some of those challenges moving on here. But our crews are busy training and doing inspections and all that kind of stuff. So then we can sit back in the office and just make plans for the rest of the year. Ooh, ha, ha, ha.
Crews appreciate that, I'm sure.
I know they do.
That's good.
Nice. But speaking of that too, actually at the end of the spring when things warmed up, the timing isn't normally right, but we just had a series of fires occurring, not the same types of fires, but we had kind of like an outbreak of structure fires in the last 30 to 60 days. Why, I have no idea, but it just kind of queued me up to an article that was in Fire Engineering recently that actually Chris has got sitting in front of him right there.
Yeah, we had a chance to look at it. Obviously, it comes out of Fire Engineering magazine. We read it cover to cover, like everyone should. Data-driven fire operations.
By
Tim, I don't want to butcher his name. Kreis.
Yeah, I didn't look to see if there's any relation to some of the other crises that have been with Phoenix Fire. I'm guessing so, that maybe there's a little bit of legacy there. But anyways, I browsed through that article and I was kind of intrigued by it. But then there was a little, and we'll have a link to that article here in the show notes. But they also had a link to a PDF that they were using to collect data after an incident. And it went beyond just doing maybe your standard tailboard talk that the guys would have right on the fire scene, or even beyond the post-incident follow-up you'd have back at the station, either right after the fire or within a couple days of the fire, getting everybody back together and walking your way through it. They were actually collecting specific pieces of data. And if there's anything I know that firefighters love to do, they love to fill out a form after they've been to a fire or an incident that has several pieces of data that they're collecting that just really trips your trigger to collect data instead of just talk about what we did and what worked well and what didn't. And so when I printed that off, I was pretty intrigued by the things that were there. And then when I went to print off the article so we could each have it, my printer ran out of magenta ink. So that's why we have the one copy for today, because we prepared this a week ahead of time. No.
So what do you guys think of data? I think maybe we should start with, I don't have the Webster dictionary of what defines data, but what is your opinion of data? What's your definition of it, and the goods and the bads? I have my theories, but I'd like to hear from you guys.
You asked a lot of big questions
first. So yeah, I gave a 7-part question.
Is this an interview?
Those
I was just going to say, I sat in on a webinar today that was discussing data, and the presenter did a really nice job of talking about it in a way that made it understandable as far as why it's important, but also went into how we do it wrong in a lot of ways. So we think we're using data, but in a lot of ways we're biasing it and don't realize it. Right. And so it started with kind of instead of going with your gut reaction, which we've all talked about before, that's been used in the past. I've done it myself. It's not very accurate. But we kind of feel like, we've moved past that. Chiefs aren't making gut decisions anymore. They're using data. Well, a big part of the problem is we're not using the data the way we should, or we're collecting it in a biased manner and or using it in a biased manner. So we want more people, or we want more stations. So we collect the data that supports that, even if it maybe does or does not support it, or it's maybe not needed.
Just kind of leave that data out of there.
So we go about it that way. And he, in his presentation, he was talking about you should actually approach it from the angle of why don't we need it? And then that helps you build your case for why you might need a new station or more personnel. And he was at the point where he's at a much higher level with this, where the company he's working with has started figuring out, well, how much do you gain from adding a station? How much do you gain from adding an apparatus or a quick response unit? How much do you gain from adding personnel? What's going to be your return on investment? And that was the whole point of his conversation, is then you can answer those tough questions that your mayor, your commission, your council, whoever oversees you, your administration, whoever looks at that, you're able to answer their questions. And why do you need this? Well, this is why we need it, because this is what it will do. If you can show them what it'll do. And so it's a proactive look at it. And he even talked that we should start using data more in a forecasting model. So this is what our plan is to do. Based on our data from this last year, this is how many runs we have. We're projecting this many more runs next year. This is what our performance is at. We're projecting our performance can be at this standard.
Sounds interesting, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've ever clicked on a survey, for whatever purpose, somebody going through an EFO program or whatever, vendor, what have you, but you click through the survey and you get to question number 4 and you say, well, my answer isn't in there. How is this supposed to work now? So that a lot of work really needs to go into preparing for the data collection. And it's also important to have people other than yourself or your team go through that instrument or that data collection sheet or whatever you're using to collect the data and do some dry runs with that to see, is it working the way other people would expect? 'Cause the designers in their mind, not only can they have bias to be collecting data that's focusing towards a decision, because we've probably seen those questions too, that they're, well, this is a very leading question. And it doesn't have my option on it. So that you've only forecasted 4 outcomes. Why isn't there another? Or why isn't there this? That it's good to have somebody with an outside perspective look at it that either might be a little more human or might not be as knowledgeable with where you're trying to go with it. So you can actually open up greater possibilities of where the data could lead.
Sure. What happens when you don't believe the data?
You're going to go deep right off the bat.
Yeah, I'm gonna get right into it before we jump into the article itself. But
let me tie this back in quick to what I was saying, because I kind of got off track with what I was saying. But what I was trying to get at is that's what we found with our after action reviews is they weren't getting to what they were supposed to get to. And so we've started doing something very similar in Fargo like Phoenix has, but we haven't taken it to this level. So I like this idea of actually making check boxes. You can collect the data, you can start trending some of that information. But what we found was it was a lot of pats on the back, and it really skipped over the learning points because sometimes there isn't a lot of time. It depends on who puts it together, et cetera. There are a lot of factors that can change how an after action goes. So I like having a standardized format like this. Now, to go back to your question,
the reason I question it is sometimes is and it's like use the fact of you doing run reports. So we do run reports for every single run we go on. We collect a ton of data, and it's what I call good faith data, and it's a made up term that I've somehow made up in my mind. That's called good faith because everyone intends to do the right things when they're filling out the run reports. But you have, in our department, we have 9 captains on during the day. They go on different runs and they fill it out differently. Some are biased, some are pushing agendas, some are skipping stuff, some are doing things like that. But in general, it's good faith data you're collecting. Is it true data? I'm not 100% sure. We can use some of it, obviously, to lean on and to plan for the future and do things like that. But I live it every day. So sometimes when I read some data stuff that comes out of certain people in our department, I'm like, I see what you're saying, but I'm out on the street and I'm not seeing that.
That's I guess what I like about the way we're doing it now is everybody fills it out and sends the data into a central collection point.
Right.
And we were finding biases. We were finding, oh yeah, of course, your shift, your crew, you're going to say you did a great job. And what you find is that when you get it from the rest of the shift that's there, you get other things that weren't necessarily there before, or a little bit more honest opinion. Like kind of what you're saying is you don't always get that honest data. And some of it's because maybe the person didn't see it or didn't know it happened because they were in another location at the same incident or busy doing something else. In this case, then you get everybody's perspective. And so that helps. I'm not saying it makes it bulletproof, but it helps.
No, and we have upped our game, and it's been closer to what we're seeing, what Phoenix has been doing for a while now. It's great for the debriefing, what we call a debriefing afterwards, and the crews get together online and talk about it. The goods and the bads, what we could do better, what have we thought of this, what can we do? It's all a great learning experience. Are we collecting that data for an overall year-end, this is what the fires happened and what can we improve on?
Not officially, formally, I know I collect it.
Sure.
Go through it with the training captains. There's certain things I'm looking for. So I monitor how many times was there a safety officer other than the IC? Because if it's a true working fire, I don't consider the IC and a very competent safety officer. There's too much going on with radio traffic, talking to PD, ambulance, etc. All these different entities, media. You should be focused on the fire. And so I like to see, was there a safety officer assigned? So I track that. I also like to look at, again, part of my job is safety for the department. So I'm looking at, was there a RIC team assigned? If there was, when were they assigned? When were they released, etc. But some of those things that we should be doing that we're taught to do in our ICS training over the years, we should be doing this, we should be doing that. Did you get utilities? Did you get your water supply? But I look at it from that perspective, and then in my weekly meetings, go through it with the training staff and go over it. But as a department, we're not collecting it. And that's when I see this Phoenix sheet, I go, we should be collecting it in a much bigger fashion.
Yeah, and if you guys are familiar with it and you download the document, there's a lot of great questions in here even as far to what hose line you pulled and how effective it was. So, is an inch and a half or inch and 3/4 better than a 2.5 or whatever? You have the data right there. So, depending on time of arrival, all those things come into play. But I think it can enhance your training program, can enhance how you respond on your calls itself. So I think it's a very good thing to do. Obviously people can use this as a template, but you could, if you have other questions, how many times are you getting aid? How many times do you not need aid? How many times do you second alarms? Those kind of things would come into play, and I think it'd be very good and very beneficial to collect over time, because you always do have those arguments of straight bore, fog nozzles, all these kind of different things. Well, I can have some proof that this one maybe works a little better or more efficient than the other ones. So kind of an interesting way of collecting data.
Sure. And I think you do need to start with asking, what questions are we trying to answer, or what are we trying to get out of that data collection? Because when I'm seeing this form here and looking through it, there are 43 different questions that are being asked at a fire incident. I probably wouldn't have come up with all 43 of these, but you can tell they're saying there's certain questions we want to be able to answer, certain tactics and strategies we want to line up with the end results and see how they worked out. Also want to be able to see, are we having performance issues with one district or with certain crews, or how does that correlate perhaps with their training back and forth in the end result when they're there? Even to answering, are the stations located in the right places for where the actual fires are, in terms of the effectiveness of being able to put the fire out and were their strategies effective and so forth. So you might have unique questions in your area that apply to you. For us in Moorhead right now, we've got several sets of railroad tracks in town, and one data element we're tracking is whether or not we were delayed by a train in that fire, so we can see how many times is it happening, what's the impact for all the various call types, but what are the impacts for the fire calls. And over time, that did help us get some justification for some state and federal grants to fund an underpass to help improve the fire response in certain parts of our town. And so it was designed very specifically for that purpose. If we were just grabbing Phoenix's form without figuring out, does this work for us? Does it collect the kinds of things we want to? You might be missing some things that are unique to your community, or some questions that you've been trying to answer, but you haven't, because you haven't been taking the time to write that out and figure out what those questions should be.
Right. There's all kinds of different things you could do. Effective response force, not my favorite term, but that's out there. How often an engine is unavailable, so you're pulling from a farther distance. Mm-hmm. Those kind of things are very beneficial in building new stations, in not building new stations, and doing those things. So
that's another thing with data is I think we have to be careful how much of it we collect, and kind of what you guys are talking about right now is what do we want to know? What do we need to know? Not just, we can collect it, so let's collect everything. Right. And I think that the fire service kind of jumped on that bandwagon, I don't know, the last 10 years or so, maybe not the most recent 10, but because I think we're coming out of it, we're starting to refine it now too. Yes, it's that's great if you can collect it, but you even got to be careful how much data you push out to your crews, because they don't want to read emails every day that are just full of data. So it's using the data in a way that it's actually going to do some good and be meaningful to people, cutting out the stuff you don't need, and then also putting in a format that is easy to read, easy to understand too, I think is extremely important, and sometimes gets left out.
Sure. Some of this information could be, fires in non-sprinkler buildings, fires in sprinkler buildings, and it maybe helps the case for your community to get the sprinkler codes updated, or things like that. So it helps in a lot of different things. Data, I love data. I love reading it. I love questioning it. I love challenging it. Mm-hmm. I think it's very good for the fire service to be in that. Now, well, do you guys have anything on that?
Well, you've kind of flirted with this a little bit, but what do you do when people won't believe the data?
Right.
I mean, that's what we have going in our country right now too. Is we have political diversion here, and there's a lot of information, a lot of misinformation. I just sat in on a conference last week, and one of the people there was talking about, during COVID-19, how could we have communicated better with our personnel and so forth. And I really, in my mind, I'm going, we did communicate with them almost daily, and you had Dr. Fauci on the TV almost every day. The problem was the amount of misinformation. And so I don't think that it was that we weren't communicating. I think it was that there was other misinformation. And so that's the other problem we're going to run into no matter what you're talking about. If you're talking about data, you're going to have people that don't believe it, and you might have people that are spreading misinformation even on top of it.
So you're saying that there's politics in firefighting?
So that's what I'm asking. And what do you do with the guy or groups that they don't believe it? You tell them these are your response times, and they go, "I don't believe that."
They don't believe it. No.
That's a whole nother show.
Is that
their human behavior?
Is that as administration? Is that acceptable? Does it work? I'm asking for a friend.
In most cases, I think people believe the data, they understand the data.
Right.
But you're going to have, again, in every organization, no matter what you do, you're going to have people that don't believe it.
Right.
Don't believe you.
Does it matter who it comes from?
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If the chief is in it and people are maybe think the chief's got an agenda, could twist the data.
Yeah. Or the staffer that's in charge of that particular data collection point. Yeah.
Or the union, or all kinds of different people out there that could possibly be construed as having an agenda somehow.
And I think that's where it's important as we do things. We're seeing it more and more. It's one of those, I think, very positive trends. At least I've noticed it in a few different agencies that I've been around in the last year, is the union and administration working together. Yeah. And when you work together, you're going to get a lot more done. If you're fighting, you're not going to get anything done. Right. But when they're both involved working together on the stuff, then it's easier to believe. It's easier for people to trust it. All right. So when you're working with your data, involve your people in the union. Have them be part of it. Have them understand the process. Have them understand how you get the data, where you get the data. And I think that's I guess one way that we could help.
I think that's a great answer, right? Mm-hmm. Involve all factors in collecting data.
Yep. And where possible, involved in the design of that data collection up front as well, too.
From the beginning,
not done in secret with administration, right. Even though sometimes you need that specialty of what you're thinking about up there. And again, the questions that you're trying to answer. But oftentimes if you're working in a group with people that aren't at that same level that you aren't working outside of that, they can come up with additional questions you should be asking that you wouldn't have thought of yourself either in that process. So you build a little bit of trust and you probably get better data and more well-rounded data. And when people understand what we're going to do with the data, you're probably going to get better data collected if they understand what the output is going to mean or what kind of planning decisions are going to be made. So I'm looking at Phoenix's and question number 28. Were there any solar panels on the building or otherwise involved? Yes or no? I personally, here where we don't get a lot of sun, don't really know what the implications of that question are, why it's important, or why you would ever collect that data. Now, people west of here and south of here might say, "Oh, you idiot!
You got to collect it." Yeah.
No, they would just say, "You idiot," and they would stop right there. But no, the folks that are in sun-filled regions, it might be very obvious why they're collecting that data and what they're going to make out of that.
But could we swing it? Did we have a excess snow load on the building? Did we have so you just design it for your community? I think is very important. But not a lot of solar panels up here.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't have to have a question about did you need to shovel out the hydrant prior to making water supply? Was the fire hydrant frozen? Or that would be in a list of 5 different checkboxes of any disruptions in the water supply.
Yeah, winter wise.
Snow requiring shoveling, frozen hydrant.
Right, river low. So there's very good information on the survey. There's near miss surveys, there's Maydays. Did you do a post-incident critique on site, before you left? That's very important. Did you gather all this information to have an official post-fire a visit with the crews? I think it's very good. I would like to, if you read the article, and I recommend that everyone does, and look at this checklist, but there is a what we have learned area in here, and it's very good very good information. I'm not going to read this article to everybody. You can read it yourself at Fire Engineering. But there was some good information that they were able to gather, and they could, like say, design their training programs, design their policies. They could put more money towards a certain area that they were using often, all the time.
Yeah. One thing I found when we're talking about data is when I was going through the Executive Fire Officer program, and I'm a little more old school, so I was done with my program about 10 years ago, but one of the key classes in there was a community risk reduction class, and you needed to bring your local data to analyze your fire problem and your community risk problems. So who's getting injured, who's at risk for various types of incidents. And I knew what the national statistics were because we talked about that in class. And then when we pulled our local data, I was amazed to find out that the fire picture in Moorhead, Minnesota is almost identical to the national fire problem. And I would have sworn up and down, no, that's not true. But our data showed that yes, young adults and our young kids and older adults are at much higher risk in the city of Moorhead for being killed or injured in a structure fire. Alcohol is a factor. Socioeconomic status is a causal factor in fires. And I would have sworn that I haven't seen that when I go out to fires. But then when we looked at the data, we realized, holy cow, yes, we do.
Right.
Son of a gun. And so sometimes the data makes it clear. And sometimes data points out things that you did not expect. And you could have swore were different. Not just we meet a national standard, but that's what Phoenix was looking in some of their findings. Hey, here's our real picture after looking at runs for a period of time. So what does that say? That's the after analysis part. Is what they found appropriate or not? Or is it the best use of resources or the best outcomes that we want? Does it meet our standards? Yes or no? So the data alone doesn't really tell you what you need to do. It just gives you the point to ask a lot of questions and decide where you want to take it from there.
I think it's...
Yeah, well, the other, I guess, piece I was going to say is that's important in some situations, especially if you're doing a survey, is that it be unanimous, that people aren't afraid to speak up or to make suggestions. I know for our training, with our monthly training, we started sending a survey out, 4 or 5 years ago now. But that survey goes out every month after training. And the first few months, the first year, it was a lot of shots at the training officers, jokes, that it was not that useful of data. But over time, we've moved away from that, and we get really useful information from people. And part of it is with it being unanimous. If it's something that they think it's not necessarily that's a criticism of training, but they're going to be less likely to put that down if you know exactly who sent it. And
right.
They're unanimous. And so, yes, we've worked past some of the pot shots that people took, and now it's almost all really good, useful information. And we get constructive stuff in there that we go, oh, we didn't think about that. Let's add that in. And then we use it in the future, and it just makes it better.
Right. I think that's important. We do post incident debriefings on our shift, and I am one of the incident commanders usually at those. And I'm an adult. You can take your shots at me. I know when I didn't do something, or then I need to learn all the time. Even after being several years in the fire service, I continue to learn all the time, or remember, or change my methods or those things. That's important. So go ahead and take shots at me. That's fine. I also get shots back. I can take shots back, but you know what I mean? It's, this crew didn't do this. What were they thinking? But we try not to do that. You try to learn lessons learned and how to get better. And we are individuals, we are crews, we are shifts, we're departments, we're, employees of the city, we're, the whole, we can go all the way to one big happy USA, right? So we're all trying to get better and try to do the right things and make sure nobody gets hurt. And do things as efficiently as possible. But can you take this data and use it with your city government? And how would you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got an area where you've noticed your response times are deficient, or in a part of town that is seeing more damage at structure fires than other, it can indicate that a place that needs more resource needs. It could identify missing pieces of equipment that you truly need to have because you weren't able to be effective at certain incidents because you weren't carrying what you needed to have on there. And it could also be showing the success of crews that are there. So if you institute a new initiative and you're seeing improved results in the community, that can demonstrate the success and the value, and that the investment in that program was worth it in the first place and can be worth maintaining that investment as well.
Or it's not working.
Yeah, well, absolutely, that too. Yeah, to say we've tried it. It sounds like a good initiative. We thought it would have these results. It didn't. Data may not answer the why without more analysis, but yes, absolutely. And elected officials and administrators in your city are much more likely to pay credence to what you're saying if it's backed up by some data and backed up by some thoughtful reasoning and analysis to go along with it.
So you talked earlier about when you're in the EFO program, youth, elderly, socioeconomic issues, these kind of things. You could probably gather that data like you did, and then bring it towards the city fathers, mothers, commissioners, whatever, and have maybe get some money towards those programs, maybe change building codes, maybe do different things like that. So it's a good.
Yeah, and when we were partnering with the American Red Cross on smoke detector installations, it helped us zero in on where would we have the greatest impact by doing this.
Yeah, where they don't have smoke detectors. Where would that be?
Yeah, and correlating the fact that the places where they don't have them as much are the other thing is when we do this, we did an earlier smoke detector installation run before the Red Cross was doing these kinds of things. And we did it in one of our manufactured home communities. And we were able to document a significant decrease in structure fires after we did that, and a significant decrease in injuries and deaths due to those fires in that trailer court, which indicated that program was
just by buying smoke detectors.
By buying and installing smoke detectors in the community.
That's an easy fix, right?
Absolutely. And we figured, well, we'll do these, but maybe the batteries will be pulled out in a month. Maybe we'll have this, maybe we'll have that. But when you actually see that the number of fires go down and the number of injuries and deaths go down, which is where it's really at. Yeah. You say that time was well spent. That's a program that's very valuable. And it's not just how much money do you place on a life, but when you say for the cost of some smoke detectors that were mostly donated and our labor that we did while we were there, that you actually made a difference in the community, which is why we're here. I mean, that's can't have a better feeling than that we made a difference.
Yeah. That's why I'll go back to the beginning. Collecting data is pretty important. Working your way through data, difficult, but it's very important to grab that data and start looking at it closer. So good.
Very good. If I'm looking at data right now, I see that we've been recording for about a half an hour, which is, sometimes beyond our ideal target. And I think right on the edge of our audience's tolerance.
Yeah.
Data talk.
Data talk. Yeah. We've been data collecting for a while.
We really should put a survey out after each show and analyze the topic.
Most people click off after the weather. They just want to hear what's going on up here in the weather.
Which is why your local news does not start off with the weather at the beginning of the newscast. Maybe we should be moving our weather report to the end.
To the middle.
There you go.
Right before sports.
Right, for the middle. It's one TV station.
Folks to the end.
Yeah. We have one TV station that's splitting it up, and the weather is half before sports and now half after sports.
You could add health ailments in there toward the end.
Yeah.
Those old people right to the end.
Right. Talk about.
My back's a little tight today.
Yeah.
Tell everybody how I'm doing.
Right. So I don't know, I guess just to wrap it up, I would definitely recommend reading the article, clicking on the links that come with it. I apologize if I butchered Tim's last name, and I'm not going to even try again, but he's an assistant chief from Phoenix, and he's been around since 2002 at that department. So he's got a lot of knowledge. He's obviously doing some good things out there in Phoenix. I think any department could probably do this. Collect this data.
I'd recommend that if you have an idea and you're not working on data for your department, bring it to the people that are. I know because I've worked a lot with our data that I'm always interested, and that's one of the conversations we have is what else should we be collecting that we aren't?
Right.
And it's hard because you're always wearing your firefighter blinders, and a lot of times somebody in the organization has a good idea. Bring that forward, and you might either find that we're already collecting it and we know what it is and we can share that with you, or we might find that we're not collecting it and it would be nice to have that information, and we'll try and find a way to add it in or collect it.
Craig, you and Jeff are high up in administration. You have time to look at this data all the time? Or are you constantly just strewing over it every night?
No, not constantly. Like to have the help of other folks who can process the data and get closer to the results phase and then see what that means for us.
Some departments are adding analysts to their department, which is great.
Yeah.
We all know how easy that is to get done sometimes.
Yeah.
Not a lot of money available for that, but it's something you should be looking at.
Yeah.
Start planning ahead, and maybe it's in your 5-10 year budget or whatever, 10-year plan, that you have someone that can sit down and collect it and organize it. And
if you can't, find somebody in your department that's interested in it or has those strengths or that training.
Went to school for it, or
Yeah,
exactly.
Or find somebody in that GIS department who's kind of just loves the idea of helping the fire department out with data because it's more interesting than some of the
We just interviewed a kid the other day that was his dream job was to be a police analyst. Remember that?
Yeah.
Did we hire that kid? We probably should hire that kid to jump to the top. We'll just convert him to the fire side.
There you go. And if you're not ready to start with a full 4-page survey with all these questions, start small and add from there. So 3 or 4 questions that you really want to have answered in your department to begin with.
Yeah. Well, it seems like I'm constantly doing surveys at work, and it's obnoxious sometimes, but we're collecting data for runs and all those things. But then the surveys come at us, cultural surveys. How's training going on? What's the hazmat team doing? All these different surveys we're pumping out. So it's good data. Good data. Take the time. Be serious about it when you get those survey monkeys in your emails. Be serious about it. Don't just blow them off, or that's something I have to do, because you can only help add and make programs better. So take them seriously, people. And because we're going that direction, because citizens, and we have been in that direction for a long time, but like city commissioners want to see data. They're dollar people. They're money people. They're numbers people. Not too few are just emotional. Starting to get a few, but they want it. You want to increase your budget by $3 million because of why, and you better be able to say why,
and tie it to an impact.
Yep.
Show a difference that you've made in the past with those kinds of changes if your city's in a growth phase, so you can predict the outcome of this investment.
Does your new station provide better run times? Does it lower your ISO? Does it do all these things? You better have that data.
That's exactly it. It's their job to choose the level of service you provide.
Yep.
It's your job to educate them on what you can do with the different dollar amounts, with the different staffing levels, with the different numbers of stations.
Here's your options.
Equipment. Exactly.
Yep.
Here's what we can give you for this. And so if you want the best service, this is what it costs. But we have to have the data to back it up. You can't just say that.
Yeah, I want 12 stations in my department. Just because I want them doesn't mean I want 5 guys on every engine. That doesn't mean it. You have to prove those things.
I'd be happy with 4.
Right.
So
we would be happy if you had 4, Jeff. Oh, good.
All right. Well, that wraps up the exciting data episode of Tailboard Talk. Every so often it's fun to get off the topic of hiring and promotion.
Hiring and promotions. And in fact, we should stay have it for a while.
Yeah. For a long time.
Good.
Right.
Good.
Well, very good. Enjoy the summer out there. We appreciate you tuning in and thinking this stuff through. Check out the links in the show notes to get to that article and download the PDF and check that out. And otherwise, between now and next month, stay safe and hope to have you listening to us again in about a month or so.
Oh.
Thanks for listening.
Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to Tailboard Talk. Don't forget to tune in each week, Monday through Friday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern, 8:30 p.m. Pacific for Fire Engineering Talk Radio. You can also subscribe to all of our shows on iTunes. Just search for Fire Engineering Talk Radio. Check out our educational programs and consultation services. They're all available at tailboardconsulting.com. There you can find links to all of our shows and our magazine articles. Thanks for listening, and join us again next month for another episode of Tailboard Talk on Fire Engineering Talk Radio.